So you bought a used plane and you want to rebuild it? Welcome to video number 3 in the series. We are ready to run this aircraft. Now, that has been the focus to get to this point in the video series. If you are not familiar what this video series is about, there's a link down below to the other 2 videos. And if you haven't watched those, I suggest you watch those first to get caught up to this point. This is the final video in the Super Bandit video series. We've got the engine run to do first, which is going to be fun. And then we've got a lot of little fine details to wrap up on. So there's a lot to cover in this video. Thanks guys for tuning in. Let's get ready to run this engine. All right guys, this engine run is going to be a little bit different than what we would normally do on a build series. The reason for that with this older aircraft is there's a lot of kind of fine details that go into an aircraft like the Super Bandit with a full bypass system, and it just requires more attention. So we're going to get this thing started, and I'm going to start it with the bypass cover installed. The reason I'm going to start it with the bypass cover installed is just because of our engine positioning here. I want to make sure that that's not going to be an issue. Once it's running, I'll take the bypass cover off. We'll go through kind of our normal process of accelerating, checking and making sure everything's running properly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hatch up this entire aircraft. So bypass on, hatch, canopy installed. And the reason for that is we want to make sure, number 1, that it runs properly in that configuration. And number 2, we want to do a heat check around the back end here. So these old BVM Super Bandits, they've got a blanket of ceramic material installed in the whole back section here. And with a full bypass, that's kind of one of those things that is important to check. So that's why we're checking it. And we just want to make sure that everything is copacetic with the plane. So that's the plan. I'm going to get my safety equipment ready, my radio ready, and we'll get this thing run up. What I'll do is as we go through this process, I'll put up on the screen exactly what we're doing and kind of minimize the amount of wasted time just listening to the engine run. So, all right, so part of the reason we've got it up on the table is so that it's not blasting my, my asphalt gravel on my driveway everywhere. All right, just getting our GSU hooked up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this thing on, get our fuel volume programmed first, and then we will go through our startup process. We've also got to prime the fuel system as well. So, all right, so first thing we're going to do is prime the fuel pump. Fuel capacity, we've got it at 3,000 milliliters. We're going to bump that up to 3,400 because that's what we were at. All right, so we are ready to start this engine. Let's do it. We've already learned the radio previously. Now we may have a failed ignition because of the amount of air bubbles in there. I see a lot of air bubbles. I didn't want to put too much fuel into the engine. Still have air going into the engine. Worked. restart test. Not intentional. All right, so everything ran really well with the engine. Obviously we had that one flame out, which was definitely a problem. We've got some heat buildup in there, which isn't great. As soon as I turn the engine off, and there's no air flowing through there, the bypass gets quite hot. So yeah, definitely on a plane like this, you really want some air moving through that aircraft. So as soon as I turn that engine off, no air moving through, this got really hot. But with that air moving through from the blower, it really helps out. So that's something that I would always do. So definitely not a bad idea. I mean, obviously the ceramic heat shield helps with that, but that's the nature of these full bypass systems. Now, when they're running, they run absolutely amazing because there's so much air moving through here that, you know, like I've talked about previously, air in equals air out, or air out equals air in. So there's a ton of air moving through this thing. So while it was running and I put my hand back here, it's actually almost cool to the touch. So it's pretty wild. But engine ran great, very happy. All right, so we've pulled the fuel out of the fuel system, and the next thing we're gonna do is the CG check on the aircraft. Now, we did the red Super Bandit with our RCCG machine. So we've already got all the numbers done, which because they're built from a kit, the numbers are all going to be identical. So we're just going to use our same scale numbers for this aircraft and see how it compares to the red Super Bandit. Now, my prediction, it's going to be lighter on this aircraft. I don't know how the CG is going to work out though, because we've got the cockpit and everything. So actually, you know what? I'm going to say it's going to be exactly the same. And I've got all the numbers from the previous red Super Bandit as well. So let's get this thing on the scales and check it out. All right, so we got the Super Bandit on the scales, and here is our weight. So 21.55 pounds. Let's go take a look at the numbers from the other one. So the previous red Super Bandit was 23.72. So this one's substantially lighter, but we've only got a 3,300 milliamp battery in the nose. The 5,000 that's going in there is going to be a little bit heavier. And if I go to our CG screen, we are substantially nose heavy. So what it's saying is our measured CG is 40 millimeters when it should be 17 in front of the gear. And it's saying remove half a pound at the correction point being in the nose. So kind of the point of doing this at this stage is we don't have everything installed yet. We don't have the correct battery put in or the weight allocated for the battery. I don't have the additional receiver put in, but we've got a big cockpit assembly that we can take out, and that was the whole point of getting this thing on the scale. So we kind of determined that now that this cockpit's going to come out and this canopy is going to get blacked out. That is going to be what happens. And that's going to reduce a reasonable amount of nose weight in this section. Obviously, we can measure the cockpit and see what happens, but that's kind of our goal here, is to get this balanced without any nose weight, and getting that cockpit out is going to be a substantial change. All right, so we've popped the cockpit out. It's actually really not that heavy. It's a very light cockpit, but every little bit does help. So let's weigh this thing and see what it comes in at. So we are at 125 grams, so 36912, so about 4 ounces for the cockpit, which is fine. So that's taken out. And really that doesn't change the overall of the aircraft a ton. So I'll show you guys, give you a quick rundown here of what we're going to do. So we've got it on our scales. We're using the same numbers we used previously on our Super Bandit. So basically, the Super Bandit have a range of 8 3/4 inches to 9.25 inches for CG. The red Super Bandit, we did 9.25 inches, so as far back as it's recommended. The way we're going to set this one up is we're going to go to 9 inches. So 1/4 inch more forward, which a 1/4 inch is about 6 millimeters. And how we came to that is we've got the cockpit out, right? And we've got our battery set to 340 grams, which is the weight of the 5,000 milliamp 3-cell that is going in there. And we've got 2 strips of weight on the tail, which we will be adding. Now, if we put 4 strips of weight at the tail, that brings us to 9.25 inches. If we've got 2 strips of weight, that is 9 inches. If we take those 2 strips out, that brings us to 8 3/4 inches. So all of the range is accomplished with those weights in the tail. That is where we ended up. I mean, there's really not a whole lot to do. We could go with a little bit lighter battery, but because we're using a single battery setup, that's really the way to go with the 5,000 milliamp 3-cell. We probably could have saved the weight by putting the UAT back here in the location when we first got this plane. I don't like that back there. I think it's not a good place for it. You also, depending on where you put the fuel pump, you know, if we put the fuel pump up here, we would have to run that line all the way to the fuel pump for a suction line, versus right now we've got a nice little short run. So fine with the balance. Overall, the plane is not heavy at all, and it's going to turn out awesome. So that gives us a path going forward. So we've got to add that weight to the tail, which is fine. We've got to get our canopy glass painted black, which is fine. We've got to add another receiver, which is going to ultimately be the clone, but we've got to just get it placed inside the aircraft. So lots of little things to do still. All right, canopy has been painted black, looks stealthy and good. Yeah, pretty straightforward, just taped it off, cleaned out the inside, painted the inside. And Mr. Al Watson, I have no idea who Al Watson is, but we're gonna leave his name on there as a tribute, partly because when this plane was painted, all the little water spots that were airbrushed on there, if we paint Al's name over and just black it out, it's gonna look like a patch. So we're just gonna leave Mr. Al on there. Al, wherever you are, whoever you are, tribute to you. So now we're just going to go through the list of things to do. So it's just a matter of, I've been keeping a list on my black book, and just a matter of going through and checking things off. So next thing to do is we got to take the tail section apart, meaning we got to take the rudder off and the cone off, and we're going to be putting our weights right in this area right there. So that's why we got to get that stuff off. All right, so nothing overly dramatic accomplished, but I took the tail apart, put the weights in the actual cone. Reason for that is in order to get in the fuselage portion, the pipe would need to be pulled, and it would be a lot of work. And of course, if we get it mounted here, it is as far back as possible without putting it back there, which would be not good. So anyways, weight's been added to the tail. Everything's been put back together and Loctited. We've got our built by label installed, and the last thing I did here was add our second receiver, which ultimately will be a clone. So that's not plugged in right now. The plug's just sitting there, but when the owner gets this, he can program this as a clone and then get that done. We've got all of our antennas added. So our primary antenna, one here, one here. The second clone, there's one here and one right on that side right there. So that's all been done. We've got our label installed here, 80 PSI, just a reminder that works best at 80 PSI. Last two things to do, or last few things, we're gonna put a 3-cell label on the battery plug. Not totally needed because that's the norm for this type of setup, but that's okay, we'll put it on there anyways. We're going to label our GSU plug for our turbine. So that is going to be all labeled. And then we'll just tuck that down below. And we've got some paint touch-ups to do. So the paint touch-ups for the black are just areas like this, top side, bottom side, and just little things all the way around. We want to make sure it looks 100%. All right, and I'm just going to show you guys here what I start to do as I get close to the end of a project is make sure I make a list. Now, when we're working on like a brand new plane, like the Elite Aerosports Picaro up there as an example, everything's pretty straightforward. There's kind of a process and everything's pretty easy compared, not easy, but compared to something like the Super Bandit here, where you've got an old plane that's been built by somebody else and then assembled by somebody else. You may find as you go through the process those little things that you want to update, change, etc. So that list is very, very important, because I find as I go through this stuff, you put the wings on as an example, you operate the flaps for the first time, and you find out that, hey, when I move this flap down, it rubs right there. They didn't sand out enough of the fuselage. And then, right, you heard that? And then when we get to full flaps, it rubs right there, and we can't get enough travel on this flap compared to that one. So those are all those little things that are very important to keep track of and make sure that you check them off your list. That's why we do a list. All right, we had a great delivery show up today. Our bag order from Revoc Custom Bags, Revoc. So we are a Revoc dealer, and I'll show you all the bags we got today. We've got some bags. The yellow ones are for the Super Bandit project, but we have our Carf Rebel Hot. This is fuselage, elevators, wing bags. That's for my Rebel Hot coming up. We've got our Super Bandit wing bags, which is this airplane that is in this build series. So those are awesome, beautiful bags. We've got our Picaro 2.0 wing bags. That is for one of the previous projects we just wrapped up, that guy up there. And we've got a set of BDX tail covers and fuselage bag. That's for my BDX. That's should be here next week. So if you don't know this already, here at the Lighter Side of RC, we are a Revic bag dealer. So if you want a set of Revic bags, if you need a set of Revic bags or fuselage cover, transmitter cover, strap, whatever, feel free to reach out to us. And you can also order directly through the Revoc Custom website. Now they are based in Poland, so keep that in mind that when stuff gets shipped to you, it does get shipped from Poland. If you order through us, it gets drop shipped through Poland, but we're your point of contact instead of Revic directly. So up to you guys, but if you want the best bags in the industry to protect your precious planes, Revic Custom is the way to go. All right, so getting back to our list here, what do we have left? We've got black paint touch-ups, we've got sand out the flaps area, and we've got a thumbnail picture for the first video. That's just internal stuff, so let's get that stuff done. All right, so paint touch-ups are complete. Our little bit of grinding for the flap to work 100%, that's done as well too. And our very last thing here is our tail skids. So these tail surfaces angle downwards a little bit. So when you flare, sometimes the tips actually hit the ground first. So that's what these little skids are for. So I just take some G10 material, lay it over top, trace it out, and then just make some nice skids. We're just going to take some shoe goop, get those things glued in place. The nice thing about the shoe goop is once that's installed, this almost becomes clear and you really actually can't even see this thing installed on there. So we're gonna get those glued on, just use little clamps to get them glued on. A close-up shot of our tail skids. So as you can see, they completely disappear once they're clamped in place and you've got the shoe goop on there. Now you don't need to worry about the shoe goop because as it dries, so it's drying right now, or curing, you can just peel it off, no problem. And yeah, so we're gonna leave those on for a while, let them do their thing, and then we'll peel off the excess, and that is it. Well guys, that wraps up the rebuild of the Super Bandit from BVM Jets. Hopefully you enjoyed this video series. What happens when you buy a used jet? Well, this is my suggestion on the best course of action. Tear it all down, redo it, and make it new again. Make it yours, make it fresh, and that's my suggestion to you. Encourage you guys to check out The Lighter Side of RC After Dark. The Lighter Side of RC After Dark is our live channel. We do live streams here from the shop. Generally every 2 weeks we do a live stream. It's fun because, well, I enjoy it because we get to interact with you guys if you're on during the live stream. Tons of fun. You can ask questions, we answer them in real time. It's a blast. And the other thing, I just want to give out a shout out to our channel members. Thank you, channel members, for supporting the channel. We appreciate it. If you're curious what channel membership is and you're not a channel membership is a paid thing, but it gives you early access to our videos. So generally we have about 1 to 2 weeks of videos uploaded to YouTube in advance, and channel members get to see those videos early. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.